Lauren Mitchell prided herself on being the kind of flight attendant who exuded confidence. She had worked too hard to get here, to earn her spot among the elite staff of Skylux Airlines. Every shift felt like a performance: poise, grace, and efficiency. No room for mistakes. No tolerance for nonsense. But today had started badly. She had barely made it to the airport on time after spilling coffee on her pristine uniform. She had argued with a passenger over carry-on luggage before even stepping onto the plane, and to top it off, her supervisor, Mark, had given her a tight-lipped warning about remaining professional under pressure. As if she wasn't always professional. The moment she spotted the woman approaching the first-class cabin, something about her set off an internal alarm. The way she carried herself, confident but subdued, dressed in elegant yet understated travel attire, Lauren had seen this type before. Passengers who thought they could sneak into first class, hoping no one would question them. "Ma'am," she said, stepping into the woman's path, her tone cool, clipped. "Economy is the other way." The woman stopped, tilting her head slightly as if processing the words. "I'm aware," she responded evenly. Lauren barely suppressed an eye roll. She had heard that before too. She straightened her shoulders. "Then you must be lost. First class is reserved for. I'm exactly where I need to be." The woman's voice held no irritation, no defensiveness, just a quiet authority that unnerved Lauren. Passengers were already watching, their curiosity piqued. Lauren felt her patience thinning. She didn't have time for this. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to step aside," Lauren pressed, her tone sharpening. The woman didn't move. "What's your seat number?" Lauren demanded, crossing her arms. Before she could answer, Lauren felt the weight of someone's eyes burning into her. She turned to see Mark standing a few feet away, his face pale, his mouth slightly open as if he had forgotten how to breathe. "Lauren," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing?" "I'm handling it," she said curtly. Mark's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "You need to, oh God." His voice cracked, panic flashing in his eyes as he took a step closer. "Lauren, do you even know who she is?" Lauren blinked, the first flicker of doubt creeping into her chest. She turned back to the woman. That was when she saw it. The slight tightening of her jaw. The way the other passengers had fallen silent. The sudden realization in Mark's horror-stricken face. A cold dread slithered down her spine. Mark leaned in, his voice barely audible. "She's Victoria Hayes." The name sent a jolt through her body. No. Not that Victoria Hayes. Not the Victoria Hayes who owned Skylux Airlines. Not the woman whose signature was on every employee's paycheck. Not the billionaire CEO of the company she had just humiliated in front of an entire cabin of first-class passengers. Lauren's breath hitched as her stomach bottomed out. I didn't." She turned to Victoria, her lips parting, scrambling for words, an apology, anything. But Victoria simply regarded her in silence. No anger. No indignation. Just a piercing, unreadable stare. Lauren wanted to shrink into nothingness. Passengers exchanged glances. Whispers buzzed through the cabin. Mark looked ready to faint. And then, with a measured grace that made Lauren's stomach twist even tighter, Victoria stepped past her and continued down the aisle, to the first-class seat that had always been hers. Lauren remained frozen, her entire body trembling with humiliation. She had just made the worst mistake of her career. And she had done it in front of everyone. Mark exhaled sharply. "Lauren," he muttered, his voice shaking, "what the hell have you done?" Lauren's hands were ice-cold. Her feet felt rooted to the spot, her body refusing to move even as Mark hissed at her to do something. Fix this, apologize, anything. But what was she supposed to say? "Sorry, I just humiliated the most powerful woman in the airline industry? Sorry, I assumed you didn't belong here?" Victoria Hayes had already taken her seat. She wasn't looking at Lauren, wasn't acknowledging her at all. And somehow that was worse. The silence stretched painfully. Mark finally snapped out of his trance, nudging Lauren hard in the ribs before whispering, "Go. Now." Her legs moved on autopilot, shaky steps carrying her toward first class, where passengers were still murmuring about what had just happened. She could feel their eyes burning into her, their judgment settling onto her skin like a suffocating weight. Lauren stopped a few feet from Victoria's seat, her mouth dry. "Ms. Hayes, Victoria lifted a hand. The movement was slight, effortless, but it shut Lauren up instantly. "Not now," Victoria said, her voice smooth, unreadable. Lauren felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Not now." What did that mean? Was she going to deal with this later? Was she going to have her fired the second they landed? Panic gripped her throat, but she forced herself to nod and back away. For the rest of the flight, she functioned on muscle memory alone. She poured champagne with hands that trembled. She greeted passengers with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She answered questions without really hearing them. All the while, she could feel Victoria's presence in the cabin. She wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, occasionally glancing at her tablet, sipping from a crystal glass. But Lauren felt like she was under a spotlight. She didn't need to look at her to know. Victoria Hayes was watching. And she was waiting. The crew knows. Word spread like wildfire. By the time Lauren slipped into the galley, her co-workers had already heard. A few exchanged nervous glances. Others just stared. Amber, another flight attendant, let out a low whistle. "Oh my God, Lauren. You did that." Lauren shot her a sharp look. "Don't." Amber ignored the warning, shaking her head in disbelief. "I mean, wow. You must have some serious nerve. Or a death wish." "I didn't know it was her," Lauren snapped, keeping her voice low. "Doesn't matter," said Greg, one of the senior attendants. "You're screwed." Lauren's pulse jumped. "She hasn't said anything." "She doesn't need to," Greg muttered. "She's Victoria Hayes. If she wants you gone, you're gone. No second chances." Amber winced. "I heard she once fired a manager over a single rude email." Lauren's stomach churned. Mark suddenly appeared, shoving a tray of linen napkins into Lauren's hands. "You. Service. Now." His voice was clipped, his eyes sharp. "And do not mess up again." Lauren turned away from the pitying looks of her co-workers and forced herself to keep moving. A tense interaction. Hours passed, but time felt sluggish, stretched thin by Lauren's growing anxiety. As she moved through first class, she found herself near Victoria's seat again. The CEO was reading something on her tablet, expression neutral. Lauren swallowed hard. This was her chance. She took a deep breath and stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ms. Hayes, Victoria set her tablet down and looked up. Lauren's heart pounded. For a long moment, Victoria simply studied her. Then, with measured calm, she said, "Do you treat all passengers the way you treated me?" Lauren felt her cheeks burn. "No," she said quickly. Just the ones who don't look like they belong in first class?" Lauren's breath caught. "That's not." Victoria tilted her head, waiting. Lauren bit her lip, shame crawling up her spine. "I made a mistake," she admitted. "I was in a rush. I shouldn't have assumed." Victoria nodded slowly, as if weighing her response. Then she simply said, "You shouldn't have." She turned back to her tablet, dismissing Lauren without another word. Lauren stood there, humiliated all over again, before finally forcing herself to move. Landing and the walk of shame. By the time the plane landed at JFK, Lauren felt like she had aged 10 years. As passengers disembarked, she stood near the exit, dreading the moment Victoria Hayes would pass by. And then, there she was. Lauren opened her mouth to speak, maybe to beg, but Victoria didn't stop. Not until she reached the jet bridge. Then, just as Lauren thought she was safe, Victoria turned back. The cabin was mostly empty now, just a few straggling crew members in the background. "You're coming with me," Victoria said. Lauren's stomach dropped. Mark's eyes widened. Amber's jaw practically hit the floor. "Excuse me," Lauren croaked. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "I assume you want to keep your job?" Lauren nodded rapidly. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria gestured for her to follow. "Then let's talk about what happens next." Lauren's legs felt weak, but she had no choice. With every step she took after Victoria Hayes, she knew one thing for sure. Whatever was coming, it wouldn't be easy. Lauren followed Victoria Hayes through the terminal like a prisoner walking to her own execution. Her pulse pounded in her ears. The JFK airport buzzed with activity, but all she could hear was the echo of her own footsteps, each one taking her closer to whatever fate awaited her. Victoria moved with effortless grace, her posture perfect, her pace steady. Lauren, on the other hand, felt like a mess, her uniform slightly wrinkled from the long flight, her nerves frayed beyond repair. She stole a glance at Victoria's face, searching for some clue as to what was coming. But the CEO's expression was unreadable. Finally, they reached an executive lounge tucked away from the main terminal. Victoria pushed open the frosted glass doors and gestured for Lauren to step inside. The space was sleek, minimalist. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the runways, where luxury jets taxied under the golden glow of the evening sun. The silence inside was almost suffocating. Victoria took a seat in one of the modern leather chairs, crossing her legs elegantly. Lauren hesitated for a second before sitting across from her, back stiff, hands clenched in her lap. Then came the silence. Long, unbearable. Lauren was about to break it when Victoria finally spoke. "Tell me, Lauren," she rested her elbow on the armrest, her fingers lightly tapping her chin. "What exactly were you thinking?" Lauren swallowed. I wasn't thinking. I was rushing, and I made an assumption I shouldn't have." Victoria let out a soft, humorless laugh. "An assumption?" Lauren shifted uncomfortably. "Let me ask you something," Victoria continued, her tone calm but razor-sharp. "If I had been wearing a designer suit and carrying a Chanel bag, would you have stopped me?" Lauren hesitated. "No, ma'am." "And if I had been a man in a tailored business suit?" Another pause. "No." Victoria nodded as if that confirmed exactly what she already knew. Lauren's stomach twisted. "Ms. Hayes, I swear, it wasn't about. Do you remember Jacob Sterling?" Victoria cut in. Lauren blinked. "Jacob Sterling?" Victoria's eyes were locked onto hers. 2 months ago. A black entrepreneur traveling to a conference in New York. He was in first class, but you insisted, repeatedly, that he must be lost. Lauren's mouth went dry. No. She barely remembered the incident, but now that Victoria mentioned it, the details crept back in. Jacob Sterling had been polite, but irritated. She had assumed he was a last-minute upgrade or using someone else's ticket. He had eventually been allowed to sit, but not before speaking to her supervisor. Lauren struggled to find words. "That was a misunderstanding." Victoria's stare didn't waver. "And when it happened, Mark warned you, didn't he?" Lauren felt all the blood drain from her face. Oh God. Mark had warned her. Not harshly, just a quick, quiet talk about making sure she treated all passengers with the same level of professionalism, regardless of appearance. At the time, she had nodded, brushed it off. And now here she was. She had done it again. Lauren's hands gripped her skirt tightly. I swear I didn't mean. You didn't mean to assume I didn't belong?" Victoria interrupted, arching an eyebrow. "Just like you didn't mean to assume Jacob Sterling didn't belong?" Lauren's breath came out in short, panicked bursts. "Please, Ms. Hayes, I don't care about apologies," Victoria said simply. "I care about patterns." Lauren's vision blurred at the edges. A pattern. Not an isolated mistake. A pattern. "People like you," Victoria continued, her tone still infuriatingly calm, "don't realize the damage you do. You're not the person screaming slurs or refusing service outright. You're the person who makes people feel like they have to justify their own presence. Like they don't belong unless they can prove otherwise." Lauren felt the weight of those words crush her. I don't want to be that person," she whispered. Victoria studied her for a long moment. Then she exhaled, leaning back slightly. "That depends entirely on you." Lauren swallowed hard. "Are you firing me?" Victoria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her sleek leather bag and pulled out a folder. She slid it across the table. Lauren hesitated before picking it up. Inside was a document. She scanned the title. Skylux Advanced Service Training Program. Her brow furrowed. "What is this?" Victoria folded her hands together. "It's a 6-week intensive program. Customer service, diversity training, bias awareness, crisis resolution. If you want to keep your job, you'll complete it successfully. Lauren's throat felt tight. And if I don't? Victoria's expression was unreadable. Then you won't work for Skylux Airlines ever again. Lauren stared at the paper, her mind spinning. This wasn't what she had expected. She had braced herself for termination. For a cold, corporate email informing her that her employment had been terminated effective immediately. But this... "You're giving me another chance?" she asked cautiously. Victoria's lips curved into the faintest smirk. "Don't get me wrong, Lauren. This isn't mercy. This is an opportunity to prove that you're not a lost cause." Lauren clutched the folder, her pulse still erratic. Could she do this? Did she even have a choice? Victoria stood, smoothing the front of her blazer. "I'll be watching your progress closely. One misstep, one sign that you haven't learned, and you're gone. Do you understand?" Lauren nodded furiously. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." Victoria gave her one last assessing glance before turning toward the door. Just before leaving, she paused. "Don't waste this, Lauren," she said. And then she was gone. Lauren sat frozen, the weight of the folder heavy in her hands. She had been so close to losing everything. Now, she had one last chance to prove, to herself and to Victoria Hayes, that she wasn't beyond redemption. And she wasn't about to waste it. Lauren Mitchell had never felt more like an outsider in her own company. On her first day of Skylux Advanced Service Training Program, she walked into the conference room at headquarters expecting a basic refresher course, a corporate seminar with dry PowerPoints and rehearsed lectures. She was wrong. The room was filled with a diverse group of employees, ranging from junior flight attendants to senior staff, all sitting around a sleek, modern conference table. Some looked indifferent, others annoyed, and a few, like the woman directly across from Lauren, watched her with open disdain. "Wow," the woman muttered under her breath. "They really let you in here?" Lauren flinched but said nothing. She recognized the woman, Ava Reynolds, a senior flight attendant who had been with Skylux for nearly a decade. Ava was respected, known for her composure and fairness. And apparently, she knew exactly who Lauren was and why she was here. Lauren wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that Ava clearly disliked her, or the fact that she deserved it. Before she could dwell on it, the instructor entered the room. A tall, middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Welcome," he said, scanning the group. "I'm Daniel Carter, head of training. If you think you're here for an easy ride, let me clear that up now. This program is brutal. It will challenge the way you think, the way you react, and the way you see the world." Lauren swallowed hard. "As some of you already know," Daniel continued, his gaze briefly settling on her, "this program isn't just about customer service. It's about accountability. It's about unlearning biases, challenging assumptions, and fixing the kind of behaviors that damage our reputation as an airline." Lauren's stomach twisted. "And let me be very clear," Daniel added, his voice like steel. "Some of you are here because you need this training. Others are here because they've already shown they're unfit to wear the Skylux uniform." Silence. Lauren felt the weight of those words settle onto her shoulders like lead. She didn't need him to spell it out. She knew exactly which category she fell into. The first challenge. By lunchtime, Lauren was exhausted. The morning session had been relentless. Case studies, real-life complaints, footage of actual incidents where passengers had been mistreated. And then came the worst part, the role-playing exercise. Ava was selected as one of the mock passengers. Lauren was assigned to serve her. The moment Lauren approached, Ava's entire demeanor shifted. She slumped in her chair, crossed her arms, and acted the part of a difficult customer. "I need help with my luggage," Ava said in a deliberately sharp tone. Lauren forced a polite smile. "Of course, ma'am. Let me assist you." Ava held up a hand. "Actually, never mind. I bet if I looked different, you'd be jumping to help me." The room went silent. Lauren felt her face burn. She knew exactly what Ava was doing, pushing her, testing her, making her feel the same frustration passengers like Jacob Sterling had probably felt with her. "That's not fair," Lauren said before she could stop herself. Ava raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it? You didn't think twice before assuming Victoria Hayes didn't belong. Or Jacob Sterling. Lauren's throat tightened. That's not. Ava leaned forward. Say it. Say, that's not who I am. Lauren froze. Because she wanted to say it. She wanted to argue, to explain that she wasn't racist, that she didn't mean to be biased. That it was just a mistake. But how could she say that when the evidence said otherwise? How could she fight when the truth was staring her in the face? Her lips parted, but no words came out. Ava shook her head. Exactly. Daniel, the instructor, finally stepped in. All right, that's enough for now. Lauren turned away quickly, blinking back humiliation. A conversation with Mark. That evening, Lauren sat alone in the employee lounge, replaying the day over and over. She felt drained, defeated, exposed. She had always considered herself good at her job, but today made her question everything. She barely noticed when Mark sat down next to her. Rough day, he asked. Lauren let out a dry laugh. That obvious. Mark smirked. Ava gave you hell, didn't she? Lauren sighed. I deserved it. Mark leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. Yeah, you did. Lauren's stomach twisted. Mark wasn't trying to be cruel, just honest. And somehow, that made it worse. You know, he continued, I warned you after the Jacob Sterling incident because I saw something in you. I thought you could learn from it. Lauren clenched her jaw. I thought I did learn from it. Mark shook his head. No, you didn't. You just brushed it off. Like it wasn't a real problem. Like it was just a bad moment instead of a bad habit. Lauren's eyes stung. You're lucky Victoria is giving you this chance, Mark added. She doesn't do that for just anyone. Lauren exhaled, gripping the edge of the table. I don't want to be the person everyone thinks I am. Mark studied her for a long moment. Then prove it, he said simply. Breaking point. The following week, the training got even harder. More role-playing, more self-reflection exercises, more uncomfortable conversations about unconscious bias. Each day, Lauren felt exposed, defensive, angry at herself. But she also felt something shifting. One night, as she reviewed her training materials, she found herself looking up the Jacob Sterling incident. She found his social media, read his posts, and for the first time, she truly understood. It wasn't just about that one moment. It was about the hundreds of moments people like him had to endure every day. And she had been part of the problem. A glimpse of change. The next day, she walked into training with a different mindset. When it was time for another mock service challenge, she approached Ava again. This time, Ava crossed her arms. Let me guess. You're going to assume I'm in the wrong seat again. Lauren didn't flinch. Instead, she met Ava's gaze and said, genuinely, I'm sorry for how I treated you before. Ava's expression softened, just slightly. For the first time, Lauren wasn't just going through the motions. She was actually changing. And as she left that day, she realized something. She didn't just want to pass this training. She wanted to be better. For herself. For the people she had wronged. And maybe, just maybe, for the future of Skylux Airlines. The moment James and Olivia woke up in their Los Angeles hotel room, their phones were still buzzing non-stop. The video had gone viral overnight. It wasn't just a trending topic, it was a national conversation. Civil rights organizations had shared it, journalists were dissecting it, and thousands of people flooded Atlantic Airlines' social media demanding accountability. James sat at the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples as he scrolled through the latest headlines. Atlantic Airlines faces backlash over racial discrimination incident. Hashtag Justice for James and Olivia, a fight against everyday racism in the skies. Customers threaten boycott after airline's weak response. They're panicking, Olivia muttered from the other side of the room, reading through the airline's official statement. Look at this. We regret any discomfort caused and are committed to reviewing our policies. She scoffed. Discomfort? That's what they're calling it. James sighed. They're trying to do damage control. And failing. Olivia smirked, holding up her phone. Because look, people aren't buying it. She scrolled through the comments under the airline's post. This isn't an apology. This is PR nonsense. Firing one employee won't fix the racism in your company. Do better. I'm never flying with you again. James shook his head. They're gonna have to do more than just words. And then, as if on cue, his email notification dinged. He checked his inbox. An email from Atlantic Airlines. Subject: urgent. Private resolution proposal. James frowned. They sent something. Olivia sat up straighter. Let me guess. A settlement? James tapped the message open. His eyes scanned the text, and his stomach twisted. They were offering money. A lot of money. But there was a catch. They had to sign an NDA. Olivia crossed her arms. They want us to stay quiet. James exhaled slowly. Yep. They're trying to make this go away. Yep. Silence stretched between them. James glanced at the offer again. The amount was enough to make a difference in their lives. It could help with student loans, future investments. Hell, they could take another trip without worrying about budget constraints. It was tempting. But Olivia was staring at him, her expression firm. We didn't come this far just to take their hush money. James knew she was right. If they accepted the settlement, the story would fade. The airline would sweep it under the rug, make sure no real changes happened. And then, another black couple, maybe someone younger, maybe someone without a phone to record, would go through the same thing. James took a deep breath. Then, without another word, he deleted the email. Olivia smiled. Good choice. But they weren't done yet. James picked up his phone and started recording. Atlantic Airlines just tried to pay us to be quiet. We're not taking it. He posted the video. Within minutes, it exploded. The public backlash doubled. News stations picked up the story again. More activists, celebrities, and politicians joined the conversation. #boycott Atlantic Airlines started trending. Customers were canceling flights. Under immense pressure, Atlantic Airlines had no choice. They issued a real apology. This time, they fired Susan Whitmore. Mark Reynolds, the flight supervisor who had downplayed the situation, was demoted. And in a move that shocked everyone, Atlantic Airlines announced a complete overhaul of their training programs, promising mandatory racial bias education for all employees. James and Olivia watched the news coverage from their hotel room. You did that, Olivia said, nudging James. We did that. James shook his head. They did that. The people who refused to let it slide. Olivia smiled. Still, feels good, doesn't it? James thought for a second, then nodded. Yeah. It did. A week later, at LAX, they sat at their gate, waiting for their flight home. A woman approached them hesitantly. Excuse me, are you James and Olivia? James turned. Yeah. The woman smiled nervously. I just wanted to say, thank you. What you did. Speaking up. It meant a lot. Olivia tilted her head. Did something happen to you too? The woman hesitated, then nodded. A few months ago. It wasn't on a plane, but similar. I wanted to fight back, but I didn't have proof. Seeing you two stand up for yourselves, it makes me feel like maybe next time I can. James felt his throat tighten. The woman smiled again, gave them a small nod, and walked away. James exhaled, turning to Olivia. I guess we did the right thing. Olivia squeezed his hand. Yeah, we did. Their flight was called. They stood up, ready to go home. This time, when they boarded the plane, no one questioned if they belonged. And they never would again.